Nobody knows who the other side is, but I do. You know who it is? Turkey. And he got it. And those people that went in are controlled by Turkey.
By these words, the President of the United States didn't just acknowledge the fall of Bashar al-Assad, he named its architect. In December 2024, a regime that had endured more than a decade of brutal civil war collapsed in less than 2 weeks. To many observers, it appeared sudden, but for those watching closely, this was not a spontaneous fall. It was the final stage of a long, calculated strategy. For years, the world viewed Syria primarily through a humanitarian lens, images of destruction, displacement, and blood. Turkey, however, saw something different. It saw a geopolitical chessboard. Step by step, it positioned itself not just as a participant in the conflict, but as a decisive architect shaping its outcome. Rather than direct confrontation, Ankara relied on a mix of calculated influence, strategic patience, and what some analysts describe as rebel engineering. It worked quietly to reshape the opposition, while simultaneously negotiating with global powers behind closed doors. The objective was never just to weaken Bashar al-Assad, but to control what came after him. One of the most critical tools in this strategy was the Astana process. On paper, it was a diplomatic initiative involving Turkey, Russia, and Iran aimed at de-escalation. In reality, it allowed Turkey to position itself as the indispensable intermediary. By convincing Moscow and Tehran that it could manage opposition forces, Ankara gained leverage over both its allies and its adversaries. Idlib, the last major opposition stronghold, became less of a resistance hub and more of a controlled pressure zone, one whose stability depended largely on Turkish decisions. But diplomacy alone did not bring down a regime. The real shift came through strategic trade-offs. In geopolitics, influence is rarely free, it is exchanged. Turkey understood this well. By opening space for Russia to expand its presence in Libya, Ankara offered something of immense value. It is access to the Mediterranean and a stronger foothold near Europe's southern flank. This move complemented Russia's posture in Ukraine, effectively extending its reach across 2 critical fronts. In return, Turkey received something far more subtle but decisive. When the final offensive against Assad began in 2024, Russia did not intervene in the way it had for years. Its air force, once essential to the regime's survival, remained inactive. The absence of Russian support was not accidental. It was the result of a quiet agreement, one that changed the balance of power overnight. While these international arrangements unfolded, Turkey was also focused on a more delicate project, reshaping the identity of the opposition itself. It recognized that fragmented militant groups could topple a government, but could not build one. For that, a transformation was necessary. Through intelligence channels and sustained engagement, Ankara encouraged key figures within the opposition to evolve. Among them was Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, a figure long associated with jihadist networks. Over time, under Turkish influence, he distanced himself from those affiliations. He adopted a new name, Ahmed al-Shara, and began to present himself not as a militant commander, but as a political leader. This was not merely a rebranding exercise. It was part of a broader effort to construct a functioning alternative to the Assad regime. In Idlib, institutions began to take shape under what became known as the Salvation Government. Administrative systems were built, governance structures tested, and even military training was formalized using lessons drawn from conflicts across multiple regions. What emerged was not just an opposition force, but a prototype state, waiting for the right moment to expand. By the time the final campaign reached Damascus, the groundwork had already been laid. The fall of the regime was not followed by chaos, but by a transition that had been quietly prepared for years. Meanwhile, other regional players found themselves increasingly sidelined. Iran, which had invested heavily in sustaining Assad's rule, saw its influence erode rapidly. Its strategy depended on maintaining a land corridor through Iraq and Syria, into Lebanon, a vital link for supporting Hezbollah. But shifting dynamics on the ground, combined with sustained pressure from Israel, weaken this network. In a last attempt to reverse the tide, Iran reportedly moved to reinforce its position with a large convoy of allied fighters. The effort failed. The convoy was intercepted and destroyed before it could alter the battlefield. With that, Tehran's role in Syria diminished sharply, marking the end of its central influence in determining the country's future. Behind all these moves lay a deeper concern driving Turkish policy. For Ankara, the stakes were never confined to Syria alone. The possibility of a fragmented Syrian state, especially one that allowed for Kurdish autonomy in the north, posed a direct challenge to Turkey's internal stability. With millions of Kurds within its own borders, the emergence of a successful Kurdish entity next door was seen not just as a security threat, but as an ideological one. Ensuring that Syria remained unified under a friendly government was therefore not just a foreign policy objective, it was a domestic necessity. By shaping the outcome in Damascus, Turkey was also reinforcing its own territorial cohesion. However, the fall of Assad did not bring stability to the region. Instead, it triggered a new phase of competition. Israel, observing the rise of a Turkish-backed leadership in Syria, viewed the development with deep concern. From its perspective, the emergence of a new axis aligned with Ankara introduced fresh risks to the regional balance. Rather than wait, Israel acted decisively. As power shifted in Damascus, Israeli forces moved to secure strategic areas along the border, extending beyond previously agreed lines. At the same time, a large-scale air campaign targeted what remained of Syria's military infrastructure. Air defenses, naval assets, and key installations were systematically destroyed, ensuring that the new government would begin its existence with severely limited military capabilities. Israel's approach went further. By engaging with minority groups in southern Syria, particularly the Druze community, it sought to encourage localized autonomy. This strategy aimed to create a buffer of semi-independent regions, effectively preventing the re-emergence of a strong, centralized Syrian state. The result is a Syria that remains contested, not through a single war, but through overlapping strategies. On one side, Turkey works to consolidate influence and maintain unity under its preferred order. On the other, Israel seeks to fragment and contain that very structure. What emerges from this complex picture is a reality that challenges conventional narratives. The fall of Assad was not simply the result of internal weakness or external pressure. It was the culmination of years of deliberate planning, negotiation, and adaptation by multiple actors. In the end, the map of the Middle East was not just redrawn, it was reshaped through a series of calculated moves, quiet agreements, and strategic transformations. And at the center of it all lies a simple but powerful idea. In modern geopolitics, outcomes are rarely accidental. They are engineered.